All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to get started in the interest of time. Just a quick introduction to myself. My name is Kate Simmons. I'm the Science Director at Nurture Nature Center. I'm joined by several people who will be introducing later in the meeting, as well as my NNC team, Rachel Hogan-Carr, Executive Director, Carrie Maxfield, Art Director, and Lauren Fossbender, our project assistant, who has been instrumental in helping with this plan and meeting. Now, for those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, you have the ability to raise your hand as well as to ask questions in the chat. And due to the limited time we have and the amount of information we're trying to get through, we're going to limit it. We're going to ask you to put all of your questions and comments in the chat. And then if we have time, we'll be able to unmute you to ask questions at the end. So as I mentioned, I have a lot to get through, and I'm going to just get started and jump in. So this is a little bit of recap for those of you who are not familiar with the climate change action process that we have been undertaking as the City of Easton. But in 2016, the City of Easton signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors, which is an international agreement that they agree that climate change is an issue and they're voluntarily committing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing climate change risks. And so this is a 3-year commitment. In the first year, there is education that's done and an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions. And then in the second year, a vulnerability assessment is done and a target for reducing emissions is adopted. And then in the third year, a climate action plan. So how do we actually reach that target? Now, the City of Easton did adopt a target in 2018, which was a reduction target of 80% of the baseline emissions from the 2016 when they initially did it. This was adopted by council and is what we are moving forward towards with this current plan. Now, as part of the state program, it's called a local climate action program that the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has put on. The Nurture Nature Center, on behalf of the City of Easton, has participated in this past year with this program. And this is great because it offers us technical assistance through this group that you're seeing up there called ICLEI, the Local Governments for Sustainability, and it provided us an account on ClearPath, which allows us to do a lot of the modeling that we include in the climate action plan. It also connected us to a college student, Sam Borick, who's not able to be on, but who helped with the inventory and doing some of the modeling. And so in this past fall, we did an updated greenhouse gas inventory for 2018. And this was the findings, just really briefly, that the thing to really take away from here is that a lot of our emissions comes from residential and the energy that's required for heating and cooling of our buildings, whereas water and waste are much lower. And then transportation has a smaller subset of that, about 17%. So as part of this climate action plan process, in addition to doing that inventory and modeling of what our emissions would be going forward, as well as what would happen if we instituted some strategies to reduce those emissions, which I'll show in the next couple slides. We also created a web page. There's a link there, and I'll also share it in the chat. We did an online public survey in March of this year and got about 150 responses from the community, weighing in on goals, objectives, priorities, and strategies to include. And then we've done direct outreach to a number of members of our community through one-on-one phone interviews, and Lauren has been really instrumental in putting that forward. And then we're asking for your public input on strategies that we are proposing to include in the plan through this meeting. We will also share a survey at the end of this meeting where it allows you to sort of think about the strategies a bit more, because we'll go through them very quickly, and allows you to weigh in and we'll have that open for 2 weeks following this meeting. But I first want to address why we need to develop a climate action plan. And first and foremost, it helps us reach that target, the emission reductions target. And it provides this framework that allows us to document and coordinate and, make sure that we are monitoring to make sure that we reach that goal. In addition, strategies have lots of co-benefits, and these include everything from economics to environmental, deliverability, and social. And then smaller reasons for doing this, but also great incentives, are that the state will help pay for a shared energy manager or firm that can help us actually implement the plan. So it's not just sitting there. They can do inventories of our building stock and help put forward some strategies that are proposed in the plan. And there's also the potential for some technical assistance through student teams that's as part of a capstone program with the governor's office. In addition, the state itself has the emissions reduction target, the same as ours at 80% by 2050, and many of our other neighboring cities have taken on the task of developing a climate action plan. The city of Bethlehem developed a full-scale climate action plan that was just released earlier this year, and they have a goal of net zero by 2040. These are just some of the co-benefits that many of the strategies included in the plan would have, and another reason to be putting forward this plan. Everything from livability, maintaining our natural environment, and as well as saving money, especially for our residents on their energy and water quality, their water bills. So one thing that we wanted to put forward as part of this plan is a vision and objectives for the city of Easton. And these are some that are proposed. Some of these are recommended as part of the state program that we are participating in. They provide a framework for a lot of the components that we are using for the climate action plan. And so I invite people to weigh in the question and answer or chat box about some of these. We have making the city of Easton a leader, transforming our buildings into energy efficient buildings and sustainable places. Importantly, we want to make sure that the benefits of any climate action that we have are equitably distributed. And so we're looking at making sure that historically underserved populations participate in the process and are not harmed by any of the strategies that we undertake. In addition, we are looking to transform the city of Easton into a community that's livable, so people can walk, bike, take mass transit. Mary Liz just shared a really great article that the Washington Post put out about the 20-minute city, where you can get to everything that you need within a 20-minute walk or bike ride. Easton could be that if we have that as a vision. And then to become a leader in sustainable practices, especially related to transportation, and understanding climate-related risks and how we can mitigate those. It's especially crucial for the city of Easton because we are at the confluence of two major rivers and we have a history of flooding. So going forward in the future, many of the projections are increased heavy precipitation events that could cause a higher risk of flooding in the future. So we need to be prepared for that. So again, I welcome any thoughts on those visions and objectives in the plan as we go forward. And we're also going to have these as part of a draft plan that we'll put on the website for people to weigh in on after this meeting. As I mentioned, as part of the project, we were able to model what our projected emissions would be out to mid-century, so from 2018 to 2050. And this is what you're seeing here on the screen. So I know there's a lot going on here. The dashed green line is our 2050 reduction goal. The blue is our residential energy, the green is commercial, and then transportation is at the top. And then The overall forecast is the blue line at the very top. And you can see it goes down. And the reason it goes down over the next couple decades is because a lot of the policies that the people that we're sourcing our energy from are undertaking. So for instance, UGI and MetEd have company goals to reduce their emissions, and through their policies and their changes, we get benefits. So that's what you're seeing there. Then if we look to applying additional measures within the city of Easton, and we are looking at these at a higher level. So if we decide that we're going to reduce our solid waste emissions by 10% or commercial energy by 30 or 40%, that's what we're looking at here. And I'll provide specifics in a table in just a second. But this is showing you graphically how we can actually meet that 2050 reduction goal of 80%. There's also a goal on there called net zero 2050 reduction goal, and the city has adopted the 2050, so we definitely want to aim for that. But as part of this plan, we recommend the city examine the feasibility of doing the net zero. Net zero basically means you're balancing out even. It doesn't mean that your emissions are completely zero. That can be not feasible in the timeline that we have. But what it does mean is that you're doing additional measures that are basically taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So it is the net zero. And you can do that through planting trees or buying carbon credits on a market. So that's another thing that we are just putting forward in the plan, but it's not a part of our strategies that we're trying to get to the 80% first. So these are a summary of those high-level sectors and the policies and programs that we would do in order to reach the goals. Again, these aren't specific, like if we instituted this specific policy, we would get to the goal. It's saying that overall, if we decide to reduce the residential building contribution by 42%, and this is what we would save, and this is how we would get to the goal. And this is the way we chose to do it because it allows flexibility in the strategies that are adopted. And you can see that we're focusing a higher percentage of the reduction on residential buildings because that was one of the biggest contributors to the overall emissions. And then if I click here, you can see there's also transportation. And then there's a couple of things like cross-sector strategies that can help across the board in all of the sectors. In addition to those overall general plans, there is a recommended, as part of the program that we're participating in with the state, a number of smaller goals by different timelines. So this is a mid-year check by 2030, and these are just goalposts to measure how we're getting towards our main goal of the 80%. And so, for instance, we can aim to have 30% of our new housing units within, public transportation, high frequency transit, can make sure that we have food outlets within a walkable distance for many residents. And so many of these things are things that are going to help the overall livability of the town as well, in addition to our goal of climate efficiency. And you can see we have a number of things here that address that equitability, the low income programs, increasing the number of households that we reach with those. By 2050, those percentages increase for a number of things. Again, trying to make the city one that's more of this 20-minute city where people can use public transportation or walk to where they need to. That really helps with the transportation emissions, and making sure that our buildings are as energy efficient as possible and moving more towards being on the electric grid away from gas and oil. So the plan itself, after it outlines those vision and objectives, it goes into 10 sectors. And each of those sectors, for instance, the residential building, we have objectives. And in order to meet those objectives, we recommend a number of strategies. So what we are hoping to do within this meeting and after this meeting is to have you responding in the chat or the question box any of your thoughts. If you feel like there's something that should be changed, if something that you think is missing, if you have questions about anything, please feel free to put that in the question box. We'll be monitoring that. And then we're also, as I mentioned, going to have an online survey that I'll show to you so you can see what the format is, where you can weigh in after maybe you want more time to think about it, or you want to dive in more deeper to some of the strategies. Those are the two methods that we're asking for public input on. So our first strategy, or sorry, our first sector is municipal operations, and you can see these are our objectives. So what we've done is we have objectives, and then we've made sure to document what other strategies can help with that objective, as well as what co-benefits come from achieving that objective. You can see here that we have overall objectives of actually implementing this plan and reducing emissions from operations at the municipal level. And then the strategies that achieve this, we have a bunch of them, so we don't have all of them listed here on this slide, but when you participate in the survey, you'll see all of those strategies. But they range from things about investing in energy efficiency upgrades whenever possible within municipal buildings, creating an office of sustainability that would help oversee some of these programs and make sure that it was being implemented, integrating climate change considerations into city planning and decision making, including the comprehensive plan, hazard mitigation plans, stormwater management. Basically, all of the operations would consider climate change as it goes forward. The next sector is commercial buildings. And so we have an overall objective of course, decreasing emissions and then ensuring that any new buildings are constructed in order to achieve that minimal emissions. So things that would strategies that would be able to address these objectives are benchmarking, which is disclosing energy and water use in buildings, having a retrofit program for existing buildings, and then there's a program in Pennsylvania called CPACE, which provides some financial incentives and assistance and support in order to make some of these changes available. We would also consider a strategy that's relating to providing incentives to commercial buildings to be energy efficient, as well as updating and reviewing building codes to make sure that those are required. The next sector is residential buildings. And here it's similar, that we're trying to improve the energy efficiency of the existing buildings while making sure that the new ones are built to maximize energy efficiency. So the strategies that can deal with this are home weatherization programs, having a program for helping people get more energy efficient appliances. Importantly, for rental property owners, to increase energy efficiency on their properties, which they don't always have an incentive to do. So you could potentially tie this to the renewal of a rental license to make sure that that objective is met. And I'm going to stop here and invite one of our partners, Katie Bartolotto, who is with Green Building United, to talk a little bit about some of the work that they are doing that actually helps address some of this sector's strategies. Katie?
Thanks, Kate. Can everybody hear me? Perfect.
Yes.
So I want to start by thanking the City of Easton for their leadership in spearheading this climate action plan. We're really excited to be a part of it. And I want to thank Kate and Lauren from the Nature Nurture Center for reaching out to me to be a part of this. We're really excited to be here. And as Kate mentioned, my name is Katie Bartolota. I am the Policy and Programs Director with Green Building United. And we are here, I think, in large part due to green building being in our name. Kate mentioned before that a large share of the city's carbon emissions come from building energy use. And we as an organization are working to help buildings at every point in their life cycle reduce energy and water use, and to implement practices to be more sustainable for the benefit of building occupants. We spend 90% of our time indoors, whether it be at home, which is all 90% now for most folks, at school, at work. So what we do as an organization is try to engage professional members of ours, whether they be architects, engineers, building owners, or managers, for example, and individuals in how they can make their buildings and communities more sustainable. And so, like I said before, we try to touch buildings in every point of their life cycle. We get really excited about the cutting edge for new construction and what's possible, and do a lot of work in that space to educate folks and mobilize them toward the most sustainable new construction that is available and affordable. But we also really focus on existing buildings and try as often as possible to promote existing building retrofits and good, efficient operations in existing buildings, whether those be commercial buildings or residential. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of examples because I think that's the best way to get a sense of how we as an organization are working towards some of these end goals of a sustainable, healthy, and resilient built environment for all. So as Kate mentioned also, Pennsylvania has a commercial property assessed clean energy financing tool that we did a program on in April with the Sustainable Energy Fund, and they are the administrators of the CPACE financing program. And this is a tool that helps overcome one of the biggest challenges, especially in existing buildings, for making some of these energy and water efficient upgrades, and that is the cost. So with this new financing tool that Pennsylvania has and the infrastructure that the Sustainable Energy Fund and Northampton County provide in allowing this financing to happen, we've got projects coming online now with very exciting news that's hot off the press too from the Sustainable Energy Fund of Northampton County's first project, the Commodore, which is a mixed-use adaptive reuse project that is doing lots of energy and water efficiency in its building and using this financing tool specifically for those features. So this is a really exciting opportunity to take an existing building, upgrade it in terms of its HVAC, its lighting, its building envelope, and then also add a new efficient addition to that building using this financing mechanism. So we held an event on that in April just to give folks a better idea that this is available and open to them to encourage retrofits in existing commercial buildings. So that's one example. Another is on the existing operations side. So we work with buildings, especially those that aren't in a position to make investments without some sort of support on the capital side of the equation, but really want to stop energy and water use waste in their buildings. So we right now are hosting the third of 4 in a series called our Sustainable Building Maintenance Series for building operators and facilities managers that want to make low and no cost changes to their building to reduce energy and water use, to improve performance, to reduce utility costs, to increase comfort for tenants, all of those great co-benefits that have been mentioned throughout. And finally, another example of kind of how we bring some of these resources and ideas to our membership is through what we're working on now and will soon be released, which is our Passive House Manual. So for homeowners that are interested in thinking about different approaches with energy efficiency and with really efficient mechanical ventilation and with really efficient products for how to make their homes more sustainable, we're putting together this manual that draws heavily on passive house principles to help folks use less energy, be more resilient to power outages and extreme weather, and really just be equipped as individuals on how to make the right choices when it comes to their own homes. So these are some of the examples of some of the ways that we're trying to support our membership and the general public in the region on sustainability, whether it be through events, trainings, or resources. So for folks who are interested in learning more too, we're going to continue to engage in this process and continue to bring resources to the Lehigh Valley community. So feel free to reach out to me. I can put my contact information in the chat. Join our Lehigh Valley community, and you can help shape some of these programs and help engage with the City of Easton's Climate Action Plan through our organization. So again, thanks to Kate and Lauren for inviting me, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of the panelists today.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. So our next sector is energy production. And so the objectives for this are education about the benefits of renewable energy and what options are available. The PA Power Switch is a website where people can choose where they're getting their energy from, and they can choose renewable. It's distributed by the same person, but the source is different. And then exploring, small scale renewable energy systems. Easton is largely built out and small, but there are still things we could do related to solar power, and then supporting policy changes that allow people to make those changes. So for instance, some of the strategies that could achieve these objectives are having educational events, um, providing incentives for rooftop solar, and revising building codes, because we know that those can be limiting on some of the residential buildings' ability to actually have solar on their roofs. And then looking at some other things, the city is already doing some development of methane capture cogeneration at the Easton Joint Sewer Authority treatment plant. So continuing those and maybe exploring any options for hydropower in addition to the solar and wind and even geothermal. So those are some of the strategies that would address those. And we are going to turn it over to Jared Mast, who's with the Easton Public Market, to talk about their solar installation. Jared?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Thanks for having me. Greater Easton Development Partnership is the owner of the Easton Public Market building, which is also the home of our offices. It's about 20,000 square foot footprint. For the most part, single story flat roof. And we worked with actually the Sustainable Energy Fund of the Lehigh Valley when we first purchased the building to look at energy efficiency upgrades that were possible, that had some payback period that was reasonable, and also could identify some longer term upgrades that might be grant supported. So kind of typical things were called out in that conversion of fluorescent to LED, building envelope, mechanical systems, conditioning of the space, occupancy sensors, et cetera. So over time, we kind of have been working through some of those conversions, and found an opportunity through a separate sustainable energy fund, which is housed at the Berks County Community Foundation, which supports energy efficiency upgrades in the Med-Ed territory. So we're able to pursue a $50,000 grant for some of those energy efficiency upgrades, which the bulk of that grant was for a solar upgrade on the roof of Easton Public Market. That upgrade would produce about 20% of our existing electrical usage, and meanwhile also trying to mitigate our usage by some energy efficiency upgrades. So kind of went into it as a guinea pig to see what it would take to do this in an existing building, to retrofit what's a combination of steel and wood construction in the public market. And I'm still working through it, honestly. We had to apply for zoning, which is the first step. Also have a structural engineer sign off on the support of the roof. We had to do some structural upgrades to make sure the roof could essentially bear the load of the solar array. Currently doing that this week, actually, and then probably in the next couple of weeks we'll have the solar array turned on, connected, installed. Permitting, there's some zoning ordinances around low slope roofs versus high slope roofs. Fortunately, we have a low slope roof, which allows for a little bit more permissive solar inclusion. As the technology changes, I think the zoning will have to change, whether that's integral roofing tiles or thin film solar. I'm not really schooled up on exactly where solar is going to go, but the building code will have to sync up, I think, with the innovation on that front. I think this is part of a comprehensive approach to being a steward of the environment, and also trying to target renewable sources when possible. Last week, we signed on with our energy supplier, which is separate from Med-Ed, for the remainder of our energy usage to purchase renewable sources. So We can't produce 100% of our electrical energy on the current kind of portion of the roof that we're working on, but we are able to supplement it with clean power from other sources. And I think that's kind of the other piece of that for organizations like us. Nonprofit obviously has a different ability to attract or go after grants than a for-profit business. For-profit business or developer would probably look more at, financing strategy and return on investment and payback period. But I think, just understanding the landscape was how we went into this, and also just looking to lower our longer term operating costs as a nonprofit so that we could put those dollars to work in other ways. Yeah, so looking forward to finally turn it on. I think it will be the first commercial solar array installed in the city of Easton. Hasn't been the easiest process, and subsidy has definitely been part of what has made it possible. Without subsidy, I don't think we would have jumped in feet first, just because of the unknowns that we, unknowns, I guess, that we were looking at, and have been able to get through it without too much spending into a contingency budget. But there definitely were some things, including laying down a new roof just in that portion, so that we're not laying down solar on top of a roof that ultimately would need repair. So I would echo the call for subsidy to move these types of projects along. I also look across the alley where a new parking garage is going up behind the public market and wonder about public-private or public-public partnerships that would allow solar to go on new municipal structures that could involve some kind of partnership, and having the building code kind of support those future upgrades, especially knowing that solar is a viable possibility for all kinds of structures over a certain height.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jared.
Yep.
That's super exciting. I'm glad that you took that on, even though it seems like a lot of work. The next sector is waste, composting, and recycling. And so the ultimate objective is to reduce generation, increase recycling and composting to direct that waste away from landfills, and then the waste management practices can also reduce emissions related to that. And some strategies for that are eliminating single-use plastics, minimizing waste at city festivals and large events, providing more recycling opportunities throughout the city, reducing waste generated from construction, conducting a study of food establishments to see the amount of waste that they have, and continuing to expand the community composting program. And I'm going to turn it over to Miranda Wilcha to talk about the Easton Composting Program, which is a great initiative and one that should definitely be expanded.
Thanks, Kate. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. I'm Miranda Wilka. I help run the Easton Compost Program as well as Easton Garden Works for the Greater Easton Development Partnership. Interest in our compost pilot, which was initiated in summer of 2018, really has not slowed down since we initiated it. I don't think a week goes by that I don't get 2 or 3 emails or calls asking how to get one of our signature black 5-gallon buckets to collect food waste and participate in our program. So there's continual interest in participating and doing the right thing to divert food waste. To date, we have diverted well over 150,000 pounds of food waste, including all different types of food scraps that might not go in your typical backyard compost, such as bones and dairy. So it really provides a different source for a lot of residents, especially those who don't have a backyard. There are over 600 participating families with a primary focus on Easton residents, for which the program is free to participate, as well as a possibility to get finished compost back for their home gardens. Because there really isn't anything else like this in the Lehigh Valley, there's a constant stream of people from across the area asking how to get involved. So it's really been an innovative program for our community as a whole. Aside from just diverting that food waste, which would turn into methane, which is a more harmful greenhouse gas, We're converting and recycling it into a nutrient-rich product that improves soil health, which is really important because healthy soils sequester carbon. And I think that over the few years that we've had this program, some of our educational components, we've worked with the Nurture Nature Center. We've been at festivals to have recycling and composting available. We had a weekly check-in for over a year during farmers market hours to collect data on who was coming, how much was being brought, and what was being highlighted in this compost program. And then similarly, I think there's been a heightened interest and priority in the local food movement and growing your own food. So in our community gardens, there's been so much interest in creating additional community garden spaces. We have over 50 families from Easton involved and growing, and continual interest in food justice for all residents of Easton. And so as we're talking about climate change and resiliency and soil health, I think that the compost program has been a really positive grassroots example of Easton residents and more getting involved and doing their small part in their home kitchens and backyards, bringing their food waste in and collecting a really large amount of food waste that instead of going to a landfill is being used in their home gardens, our community gardens, the community center and other community spaces. So that's been really positive. 150,000 pounds of food waste is not something to just sneeze at. And it's also kind of a lot to think about all at once. It's not really a glamorous thing, but there are so many people who have gotten really involved in it, show up weekly, continue to thank us for the program. Right now it operates as a hub collection site behind the Easton Public Market, where residents and participants will tip their food waste in buckets and then be able to pick up finished compost. I think I'm really excited to see this being a priority in the climate action plan for this small pilot program to be invested in and possibly turned into a curbside program for all residents to participate. We've seen a lot of positive feedback and continual support from people who collect their food scraps every week and drop off. And I think it's been a really tangible, positive example of people paying it forward and actively contributing to climate and environment. So I'm excited to be a part of it and to hear more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miranda. You're doing great work, and it's really great to be in Easton and having programs like this. The next sector is water and wastewater management. So this is looking at our stormwater management and looking at ways to use the existing stormwater fee in a way that minimizes damage and to the environment and to properties. It can also include strategies such as upgrading the systems at the Easton Joint Sewer Authority treatment plant to make it more energy efficient. And importantly, it's protecting the floodplains and riparian areas of which Easton has a lot. And so for that, it's finding funding streams for restoration projects, exploring opportunities for having that restoration on both public and private properties, and then considering educating more about the importance of having naturalized floodplains and riparian zones, especially when making any development and zoning decisions. The next sector is transportation, and so the objectives related to transportation are overall reducing the vehicle miles traveled and then supporting the movement towards electric vehicles. The city already has some electric vehicle charging stations in the parking garage and some other places, and then part of the fleet is moving towards that as well. So we're on our way, we just need to do more. Some other strategies related to this could be participating in regional efforts to get expanded public transportation through a light rail system. This can also bring more economic activity to the region, which could be helpful. Making infrastructure improvements that make it more pedestrian or bike friendly. and even considering making pedestrian-only zones, especially in high-traffic areas like downtown Center Square or along the Larry Holmes Drive. So those are a few other options. The next strategy is urban forest, green space, and habitat. And so continuing to expand Easton street tree population as well as their urban forest and pocket parks. This also enhances the green space that's available for both habitat for native species as well as benefits for Easton residents and improves the value of properties as well. So some of the strategies related to this are, maintaining green space in vacant lots rather than doing new development, promoting alternatives to mowing, so having places that are meadows or native plants or don't require the emissions related to keeping a flat lawn, as well as that can also help reduce pesticides needed to keep that flat lawn. In addition, providing education and resources to owners that can help support native habitats will also help our pollinator species, and engaging in regional discussions about the warehouse development and ways that we can make that development sustainable could also be another strategy that the city works in. And so, as part of this sector, we are going to ask Rob Christopher, our the city forester, to talk about one of the many great projects that he does throughout the city. Rob.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob Christopher, the city forester for the city of Easton. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about one of our big projects we had done in 2019. We had applied for a grant through the Arbor Day Foundation, and the funding was given through Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a $35,000 grant. And the concept was to create what I call a micro forest. So it's also a demonstration forest, and we wanted to create an outdoor educational living classroom that everybody in the community could eventually use, become a destination for school children, partnering groups, and residents and non-residents of Easton. So what we did was we had planted 121 native trees and shrubs for right now within an area that's only a half acre. So we're trying to demonstrate on how a native forest in the northeastern area of Pennsylvania would occur on its own, even though we have contrived it, somewhat. But we tried to put in and create a skeleton of that forest within this area. And then instead of doing any paving or even mulched paths, I'm going in there every week and just keeping mowed paths in there so people could navigate on their own. All the trees are labeled with permanent tags on there with the botanical and common names. We will be installing shortly a nice paved path from the main road into the park, and then interpretive panels that will be right outside the park. And hopefully we're going to start to add in some rustic seating within there. It's just natural log seating. Start to introduce different shelters for wildlife, bluebirds, wrens, and other things within this tight space. And the main idea also is to let all of the lawn within there not be mowed, but maybe once or twice a year be brush cut down so that anything that's native that would start to grow in there on its own would come in and would start to attract all the wildlife, and everyone would see through years on end by visiting the demonstration forest how it would change and start to evolve as the trees grow, more shade starts to be created, and everything is, will evolve in time as a sustainable miniature forest. There are other things that we're going to be adding in too. So we'd like to put in native vines to help, because we did have to add an 8-foot protective deer fencing, because the first year we had nothing there and there was a lot of damage done to the understory throughout the winter, and when the bugs start to rub on all the shrubs. So we have that installed now, and that's been very helpful. And the gate is spring loaded, so people could come anytime to go in and out of there without the worry of the deer getting in. And hopefully, eventually we'd like to create all of Lower Hackett Park, as we also have a city nursery beyond the bridge and behind the community garden, where we'll start to house and bring in the trees that we will plant for street trees in the year, with an irrigation system in there, and create other implements in the back where we could have educational opportunities and really teach the youth um, in the area how important it is to plant trees at a young age to help inspire them and really get everybody in the community to understand how important in an urban area especially it is to have these greening pockets and as many trees as possible to help cut down on you know the heat island effect, sequester carbon, heating and cooling, stormwater runoff. There's so many different things that even one tree can do that people just don't realize, and not only above the ground, but there's so much going on below the ground. So thanks to Nurture Nature, who's helped me so many times with all different projects partnering. Miranda also has been a great partner, and as she has the garden next door from us, so we're all trying to help each other get this message out on how important it is um, to just plain old have more green within urban communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for all of your great work. The next sector is local food and agriculture. So the objective is to expand food production within the city through community gardens and urban gardening, as well as supporting the local food system. So some of the strategies are expanding the community gardening program, encouraging institutions to purchase more local food, explore the possibility of developing a bulk food store in Easton, which would expand access to affordable and sustainable food options in the area, and just having more access to fresh local food downtown in West Ward in order for people to be able to walk if they needed to. And we're going to turn this community spotlight over to Ross Marcus with the Easton Urban Farm to talk about their community garden program. Ross?
Thanks, Kate. Good evening, everyone. The Easton Urban Farm is a program of the Easton Area Neighborhood Center, which is a community-based organization serving low-income residents since 1967. The farm sits on 5/8 of an acre here at the Neighborhood Center on the south side of Easton. Last year, we harvested over 9,100 pounds of produce that was distributed through the Neighborhood Center's food pantry and vegetables in the community, which is a program of Lafayette College and is located in the West Ward of Easton. All the work here at the farm is done by our master gardener with the assistance of probably in excess of 40 volunteers over the course of the growing season. But the farm is really more than just about produce. It's also about gardening and environmental education. We use no pesticides or any chemicals on the farm and use all natural products. We consider ourselves good stewards of the land, and one of our prime objectives is to encourage our volunteers to get involved in gardening on their own and use good gardening practices and be good stewards of the land. And that can apply from something as simple as a bucket garden for those leasing an apartment, to a backyard garden, to a community garden plot that Miranda oversees throughout much of the city, and all the way up to volunteering here at the farm. We welcome people to join us, and we encourage everyone to get involved in gardening and food production. And if you produce more than you can consume, please donate it to a neighborhood food pantry. There are 10 of them serving the Easton area, and all of them would love to have more fresh produce. So in the future, we hope to continue growing the farm, growing its production, growing its educational components, and being more and more a part of the Easton community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. So the last sector is public engagement and education. And so objectives about this are to expand initiatives for public engagement, especially related to the strategies and the other strategies in the climate action plan, partnering with schools to make sure that environmental literacy is included in the curriculum, and then making sure that any progress reports or monitoring your engagement regarding the climate action plan is open and transparent to the public. So some of the ways that this could be achieved are to have a new or existing city staff member take on the role of coordinating outreach efforts regarding the climate action plan, having the city partner with trusted community organizations to conduct multilingual outreach and other educational activities related to climate. Include a new or existing monthly newsletter update about the CAP. It could be included in the newsletter that the city already does, or be a separate one. And then promoting leadership opportunities for youth related to climate, involving local schools in implementation of some of the strategies of this CAP. These are all strategies that could be employed going forward. So we're getting close to the end of the hour. Again, I welcome people to have their questions or comments in the question and answer box or chat, and we will definitely address them. So next steps are, as I mentioned, that we have a survey that you can fill out, and I will be putting a link to that in the chat, and I'll also be updating our website with that link as well. And it'll go out to everyone who's registered for the meeting as a follow-up. You can follow Nurture Nature Center. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Facebook, we always update it every day. So if you want to keep track of the progress to the report and anything that we're involved with going forward related to climate in the city, please see that. The other major thing that we are hoping to do over the next month or two is to ask all the residents in the city to help us with a project called I See Change, where you are citizen scientists that help us observe where in the city we need to have strategies related to extreme heat. So where in the city is it super hot, where it needs shade, or it could benefit from a covered shelter for a bus stop, those types of things. You know the city best. So where we can prioritize strategies related to dealing with extreme heat, definitely we want your input. And I will share a link to that too, and also show it to you in a second. And then we have a bunch of rain barrels that we had as part of a educational workshop that we did earlier in May, and we still have some left over. So if anybody would like a free rain barrel, you can contact me or reach out to us at Nurture Nature Center, and we can get that to you. We also will have a community distribution event related to putting out preparedness kits. So these are really cool buckets that have lots of supplies that you need in the event of a emergency or natural hazard. Everything from granola bars to flashlights to first aid kits. We'll be distributing those free to the community in our parking lot on June 5th. That's a Saturday. And that at that same time, you could also pick up your free rain barrel if you're interested in one. You just need to reach out to us to let us know about the rain barrel. the emergency preparedness kits are first come, first serve, so please just stop by from 12 to 2 p.m. at the Nurture Nature Center. And I'm going to stop the presentation and show you the survey. So this is the survey. It's really just two quick questions, and then you can weigh in on any of the sectors that we reviewed here. For instance, if I wanted to weigh in on the residential buildings, I would click on the residential buildings and then next, and it will show you all of the strategies related to the objectives. So this is all the details. And so it's just a general feedback. You collect next, and it'll take you back to that main page, and you can go to any other category that you want. And then when you're done, you would click finished and next to submit it here. So make sure you click submit, and you don't have to go to all of the sectors. You can choose whichever ones you want to go to. You don't have to fill out the whole thing. Then the citizen science project is called IC Change. So it's icchange.org Easton Heat. And I'll put that in the chat. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. And so this, you can sign up to add a sighting. They have an app on your phone too. And you basically are just saying, you know, today is really hot, it's super humid, this part of town needs help. We're just trying to get observations of throughout the city to help inform what strategies we recommend in the plan. So that would be super helpful. This will be open for June through July, and there's some explanation and some questions to answer there. And then this is our landing page for the Climate Action Plan at Nurture Nature Center. I'll put that link in the chat too. And I'll also share the survey in just 1 second. I just have to navigate out of this. So with that, I welcome any more questions. You're getting close to the end of it. We just have a few more minutes. Again, I just put all the links I discussed. I just put the survey in as the last link. So I welcome your input on that. And then as in terms of timeline, we hope to have this finalized draft. We're going to run it by our stakeholder group and the city, and then have a final draft to the state at the end of July, and go forward from there.